To my Dungeons and Dragons crew. I played Dungeons and Dragons for the first time tonight. I don't know, do we have any Dungeons and Dragons fans watching tonight? My character Bruce was kind of useless. I attacked the goblins with whatever I had. But shout out to my friends who are watching, playing Dungeons and Dragons. Hopefully you're able to complete the challenges, whatever they turn out to be.
But this week, as opposed to last week, has actually been a pretty hot news week.
There's been a lot of news, and that's why, we had to make sure we got chatting because, I mean, things are blowing up at the provincial level, the federal level. GM, General Motors, decided to cancel a plant in Oshawa. It's been there. I think automotive production has been in that area for about 100 years.
Yeah. It's
what else?
we're also going to be talking about the resignation of Raj Grewal.
Yeah, Raj Grewal is a Liberal member of Parliament
from Brampton, and he resigned this week for personal reasons.
Initially looked like personal reasons. Then
medical reasons.
He had a gambling addiction. Then we found out.
We'll get into it in a moment.
There's so much to talk about at that.
And the last topic we're talking about is.
We're actually talking about the fact that the federal government is getting in the business of media and journalism, something that's interesting for us as an independent media group.
We're wondering if we can get a piece of the pie.
Yeah, I mean, like the thing about it is, bare bones, they're talking about almost $600 million being given to journalists, and the question is, can journalists stay independent and unbiased if they're getting all of that government funding?
Mm-hmm. So where do you want to start?
Let's start a little bit with the General Motors plant in Oshawa.
Okay, so this is a fraught discussion. General Motors announced that they would be they wouldn't be producing any more products out of the
plant in Oshawa.
The plant in Oshawa. Yeah. Opposition has erupted across the board. You know, in the federal government, in the provincial government, unions are getting in on it already. There's been criticisms from thrown at Mexico, at the government. Yeah. It's a pretty wild conversation. What's your take on it, Andrew?
Well, I think that what's interesting about it, right, like General Motors, Chrysler, they had issues in 2008, right, and there was a massive bailout of the American government, the Canadian government in response. What's interesting is some of the different response now. So you have even the provincial government looking at more of a bailout kind of solution, but also
perhaps
looking at maybe retraining people in the area. You have the federal government.
Yeah, so I saw a lot of criticism thrown at like Trudeau almost for having such a similar response to Doug Ford. Both of them were kind of like, yeah, well, you're out of luck. Like, it was time to change things up.
It was kind of odd. Like they're surprise, surprise. Doug Ford and Justin Trudeau don't always get along, but they were tweeting out today like, oh, we had great phone calls about this and we're committed to working together. The federal conservatives seem more concerned about the taxation levels and the regulation levels. Basically, their argument is if they had lower corporate taxes, if there wasn't a carbon tax, if there wasn't as much regulation, then the companies wouldn't want to leave
Exactly.
Canada.
So there's like GM has been a massive beneficiary of corporate welfare and government incentives over the last few years, the bailout being the most major one, but it's certainly not the only one. So I really think all those solutions are really unsustainable, and what the Conservatives are offering is ultimately getting more at the root of the problem. So if you want to get businesses to stay in Canada, if you want to keep a competitive business environment, if you want Ontario to be open for business, you have to have lower corporate taxation. Obviously, that's only partially a provincial jurisdiction. It's split between the federal and provincial levels, but we do need to become more provincial with the United States, absolutely. But also, there's some accusations that been thrown at Mexico because there's a quite powerful lobby of employers that collude to depress the wages of Mexican workers, which would also be eroding our competitiveness. So that kind of thing should definitely be dealt with, and hopefully it will be kind of addressed in the new NAFTA agreement because it's not finished negotiating
now
yet.
Some other observers, like non-governmental observers, have said look, GM is doubling down on a transition to electric cars.
Yeah. And Doug Ford has been criticized for removing incentives for GM to build electric cars.
I don't know. Do you think, and people watching, do you think it's inevitable, like, that Canada should just be getting out of the production of cars in general? So, like, are cars kind of becoming a thing of the past?
It's an interesting topic. I think cars are like, as much as public transit is helpful, it's really mostly helpful and like economically viable in the big cities.
Mm-hmm.
Cars are so essential for people in rural areas, especially,
totally.
and even for people living in suburban areas, it gets difficult to use public transit. Obviously, we need to balance the two, and I think when we're thinking about more realistic kind of carbon kind of reduction initiatives, I think focusing on cars is a really important place to start. So having those kind of initiatives is kind of important. There's been a lot of criticism because these kind of tax incentives don't do enough, and the cost of cars are still really high. So now we just get a benefit to the rich, while the poor take a lot of the burden. But that's the start, right? You need to, as the rich start to increase their demand, then the supply will increase and the price will decrease and stuff like this. So maybe we need to have a more patient view. But in Ontario, we're dealing with such a almost an infamous kind of debt problem at this point. It's reasonable to try
basically
and cut.
If you have companies, though, if you have companies who are going to be committed to creating a completely new product that is more expensive to make, like I imagine a new technology product like electric cars, more expensive to make, if it just doesn't make sense to make it in this jurisdiction, can you kind of blame them for moving it to another area?
At the end of the day, if we can get lower cost electric cars due to production in Mexico, that would be at least positive from a climate change perspective, right? We want to get we want to saturate the market with cheap electric cars to make a transition as easy as possible, and that's going to be a really difficult transition, right? Especially for poor people who can't really afford. And what's going to happen to all the kind of combustion engine cars and stuff that are kind of suddenly need to be recycled and removed, and that's a whole different problem with environmental implications. So Doug Ford has been criticized for being responsible for this, for removing those kind of incentives, but I think the Conservatives are more kind of
there's one other response that some people have thrown out of potentially nationalizing this type of industry. Oh my
God! If Justin Trudeau does that, like,
it's a similar it's different, but there are some aspects of the pipeline situation. The government came in, spent a whole bunch of money to buy up the pipeline to get construction going.
To support the growth.
I'll play my cards out on the table. I wouldn't be supportive of a government nationalizing an auto plant, but if push comes to shove and you have thousands of people out of work, is that a viable option?
I think it's just a really unsustainable solution to the problem. I think that's probably like the peak kind of unsustainable solution. Like, idealist situation, the government becomes the best like electric car producer in the world and brings investment to Canada, but like it really just doesn't seem like a likely situation. And given the deficit levels at both the provincial and federal level, like it further doesn't seem like a responsible solution. We need to think of more cheaper solutions.
Yeah.
Frugal.
It's certainly like one thing, like, just to wrap it up on that, like, it seems the politicians were fairly united in assessing how devastating this is for Oshawa, right? Like, it's going to be a massive loss for the families there. I mean,
and like, as workers move away, it has knock-on effects on all sorts of different secondary industries and stuff.
Exactly.
So it's definitely going to be a huge problem. I saw a funny tweet from some sort of Alberta political page, and it was build some refineries and we'll send you all the business you need, which I thought was pretty funny. But again, not realistic considering the pipeline situation in this country. Do you want to?
And then, in connected to that, in regards to government getting involved in industry, I mean, you have the Liberals announcing about $595 million over the next 5 years for journalists from media, funding for them. Basically, it's in response to the crisis of newspapers, right? The fact that there are fewer subscriptions, it's more expensive,
media, mainstream media,
and
in general.
it's difficult to pay journalists. I can imagine what your thoughts are right off the bat, but what were you thinking when you first heard this?
Well, my first thoughts are like the government buying out more media, taking the CBC problem to the next step to kind of bias journalism.
They pay $1 billion to the CBC in tax money already.
Yeah.
It's another $600 million over 5 years
On
to
the board.
other media.
To all sorts of media. I assume it probably even applies. I guess it probably doesn't apply to the CBC as well. But there's all sorts of implications tied to it. Like the government says they're going to develop a board of journalists and people in the news media to decide which institutions are trusted to receive these benefits, which is curious. And then on top of that, there's a tax credit almost allowing certain media companies to act as charities as long as they provide their media for free, which I think is actually an interesting change, because it is kind of frustrating to have certain, like Globe and Mail is is probably my most annoying. They have the best firewall. Like they have the best. They can keep going incognito doesn't surpass their security system. So they're the most annoying for keeping me out.
Oh, totally.
Without paying them. So getting that kind of content for free would be nice, but if they have to sacrifice any sort of journalistic integrity and be maybe not as critical of the government, that's definitely not a good trade for Canadians. And another thing that people have been pointing to a lot is the leader of the union Unifor, who represents a number of industries. He was in both cases because they represent the GM workers and they represent the journalists, which I thought was really weird. When I was reading these, I was like, wait, what? I just heard about this guy, Jerry Diaz. And they have openly endorsed the Liberals and criticized Andrew Scheer and the Conservatives. So it's
conflict of interest.
If that's any representative of the journalist of the organization of journalists that they choose to select what's a trusted news site, then that just sounds like a massive incentive to dull down journalism. And it's an unsustainable solution. It's back to this corporate welfare solution that just props up these companies that are failing because they're not competing effectively in the marketplace. And it's infuriating. Like if you look at some of these, they say they're having trouble with the digital age, and it's. But the solution isn't just to like throw money at the problem, right? They have to become better. They have to like fail and improve. That's how the marketplace works. If you look at some of the most major news pages on like Twitter or something, they have zero traction.
Yeah.
Like literally our tweets get more traction than them. Like they have this absolutely nonsense article about some random problem no one's ever even thought about, and it gets like 2 likes and 3 retweets or something like this. Like people do not like they need to stop producing such unnecessary content and focus on producing this critical.
The thing that bugged me was that point about they're going to create a panel to decide what is a trusted news source, because it's not to say that the groups that they're going to end up funding won't create bad content, won't create good news, but the problem is there won't be as much of a diversity of viewpoints represented, because they're going to go with the standard types of stories and types of opinions that don't ruffle too many feathers. What you need in a country, in a democracy, is you need a really robust opinions. You need opinions from all kinds of positions, from left wing, right wing, from the fringes. If you don't have that, I think that then you just get people who want to prop up the party that's in power. Yeah.
That reminds me of something really ironic I saw in the article, on one of the articles that I read. Yeah. There was a quote from Bill Morneau saying we need to support an independent media. And I just thought that was so ironic.
Yeah.
Like, you're literally
it's not. Yeah.
buying
How can it be
media,
independent
if it's government supported?
Funded by the government.
Like, it seems like a total oxymoronic statement. Like, the government needs to support.
Now the journalist's job will depend on the politicians. If you upset the politicians, they could take away your funding and you wouldn't have a job, right? I think there's some free market solutions of a sort, freer market, like tax incentives. So for instance, there was an idea floated around tax incentives for subscriptions, right? So if you buy a subscription to a newspaper, could you get a tax credit?
There was, so it was,
ideas, enhancing ideas like that, so that more people use their money to support.
So it was that news organizations that offer their content for free are able to act as.
Well, that's one idea, but there was another. I think there was another idea floated that's not floated by the Liberals that somebody else just mentioned around the consumer, like incentivizing consumers to make a choice, but
that's not dissimilar to what's going on in this.
Well, what would need to happen is that the sources that people choose need to float to the top, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
But offering, what they're doing is offering news organizations that produce their content, release their content for free, to act as sort of charities and be able to provide tax receipts, which is a sort of corporate welfare as well, because it's literally tax funding that. So it's an interesting. I like it more as a standalone than this huge slush fund, because it does encourage, like it encourages people to buy more of their own media. But the thing is, it looks like it'll only be provided to these trusted media sources again. So like, it sounds great. It sounds like, hey, can we do that? Can people donate to us and get tax receivability because we provide our content online for free? But I have reservations that we would qualify as a trusted news source.
Well, I would like to say True North News is pretty trusted, but I'm
not
think? Sure if the government would. Actually, that's a great
TNN,
question.
CBC?
For everyone watching with us right now, just comment below real quick. What is the most trusted news source that? And honestly, you don't have to say True North News, but what are some of the news sources that you consider to be the most trusted? Just comment below. Personally, I do read some of the CBC online articles, but Globe Mail, National Post, I read a lot of National Post.
Yeah, I like the National Post, the Financial Post.
I see some CTV stuff. I mean, I remember watching Evan Solomon's show when he was on CBC. Now he's on CTV.
Global News is pretty good
Global
sometimes.
Can do some good stuff. But I really don't think you can continue, just like you say, it's unsustainable to continue to just pump taxpayer money into this industry if it's a dying medium, and if they need to adapt to the digital age in a new way. They need to innovate, basically.
And this is where I'm going to plug the PPC and Maxime Bernier, because he always has been very critical on corporate welfare and has advocated openly about dismantling these kind of systems. And it overlaps with both of these situations. There's this kind of unsustainable solutions.
And you've seen and I think you've seen Andrew Scheer be critical of this as well, that whenever these crises come up and it's about a changing marketplace and a changing economy, if the government immediately jumps to, let's cut a check, you're in trouble, because, again, it's going to be a temporary fix. I think in 2008, there was no choice in a sense, because the Americans had already decided that's what they were
Harper
going to do.
talked about that in his podcast.
Yeah, recently he basically said, like, look,
he had no option. Like, he's not the big guy.
Yeah.
If the Americans were doing it, everyone had to go all in on it, or else they would just lose the competitive edge.
Now, real quick, before we move on to Mr. Grewal, to the crimes of Grindelwald. I saw that movie recently.
I did.
Did you see it?
I did.
Really?
Yes, I did. I saw it.
At the very end, stick around for bonus content. We will talk about Fantastic Beasts.
Okay, yeah. I have a lot to say about that. I don't know if we'll have time for it.
This will be on the exclusive content for our subscribers. last week when we did our live stream, we got a lot of comments about the Francophone service cuts, and we were getting a bit of a debate going on about the plans for the Francophone University in Toronto. It got cut by Doug Ford. And today I was watching Question Period, and they were talking about a lot of the issues with Oshawa. They're talking about Raj. But then the Prime Minister did an interesting thing. He decided to kind of ignore Andrew Scheer's question at one point, which was about, I think, GM or something like that. And he instead switched languages to French and said in French, "Why hasn't the opposition asked me about the Francophone services cuts? Mr. Speaker, why do they not care about Francophone?" So he basically ignored the question, but tried to bring the conversation around to
something that he could be strong on.
I was just checking. Power and Politics is as part of their at issue panel. They're going to be talking about Doug Ford and the Francophone services cuts. So I wonder, do you think this is an issue that's going to be plaguing Conservatives and Liberals going into the next election?
I've done a bit more reading on it.
Like what?
I've done a bit more reading on it since we talked about it last week, and I feel even more entrenched in my views. It's so unnecessary.
It's not necessary to defend the rights of the Francophone minority in Ontario that's been in Ontario for over 400 years?
Yes.
We're going to get comments. I think people are going to tune in. If Caleb's watching at all, or Alexandre.
It's literally 97% of Ontario's population speaks English. 3% of it speaks only French.
But, okay.
And then a way larger swath of the population speaks a language other than the official language.
But those languages, that's the point. They're not the official language.
I know, but still, by a huge margin.
Shouldn't you protect the official language?
But, there are protections for French. To provide, to spend, in this situation, to spend that much, it seems like a reasonable place to cut spending, considering the debts and everything.
Here's an idea.
Considering that it's only 3% of the population.
No, but here's
that only speaks French.
Okay, but
because there's an overlap of the French-speaking, the first language French speakers that also speak English and can get services easily in English.
I don't know the percentages, but imagine in Ireland, okay, so they have the Irish language.
Yeah,
right?
Gaelic died, and then one guy tried to come back, bring it back. But he was an American. He doesn't even know Gaelic.
But the point is, you still should have. Don't you think the government of Ireland should invest in protecting that language, even though all of those people speak English and they can all get services in English?
I'm gonna be a realist in this situation. In these situations where we have such a ballooning deficit and such huge debts, ballooning debt and huge deficits. Sorry.
Yes.
This is a very reasonable place to cut some funding, especially because a lot of the duties they've just folded into other offices. A lot of the duties were folded into Carolyn Mulrooney's office and stuff like this. I think it's a pretty reasonable place, considering it's such a small fragment of this.
If you find this debate interesting and you want us to keep talking about it,
we'll make a video on it.
Let us know. We'll make a video. This will be a recurring segment.
Yeah, yes.
Et pour tous les francophones en Ontario,
the francophone debate.
Savez que Andrew Zettel vous appuie. You have my support, les franco-ontariens. Je te chante, mon beau drapeau.
And now
we got to talk about the crimes of Grindelwald.
The crimes of Grewal.
Raj Grewal.
I
heard them say Grewal on the.
Sure.
On
I'm butchering his name, I'm sure. This article or this issue I find interesting because this is the kind of thing I usually kind of ignore.
But then when you look at it, there's so many angles.
Exactly.
There's so many angles.
So you brought it up. You were like, we should look at this, and I was like, what? I literally said earlier today, I was like, what is this?
Because the initial headline said, Liberal MP from Brampton resigns for personal reasons.
Yeah,
that could mean anything.
I even saw through headlines that he was a gambling addict. I was like, whatever.
Then we found out. Yeah, he had a gambling addiction.
Low-level political scandal.
Then we
I didn't have much attention.
Then we find out he's got $1 million in debt. He's disclosed to the Liberal Party, and then he's been accused of conflict of interest by one of the oppositions. I can't remember if it's the NDP. I think it's both the NDP and the Conservatives. Both the NDP today.
Because when they went to India, Justin Trudeau decided he needs a massive delegation consisting of his family and anyone that's brown, and especially if they have a turban. So this guy's
Good
on
for
the
photo
team
ops.
because we need as many people as possible. Justin Trudeau couldn't possibly do this alone. And apparently he was, at the time, contracted as a lawyer to a CEO of a company, which name I can't recall at the time.
Yeah.
But he brought him on this trip, and it seems like he might have gotten him some opportunities with the Indian government and stuff like this. So all over the place, this guy is.
Well, and then
he's being accused of ethics scandals.
What I heard today in question period was fascinating because.
And then he hasn't even properly resigned.
He was
That's
not
the other
there.
thing.
He was that's what they started off. Lisa Raitt started the questioning today about, like, okay, is he still the member of parliament? Is he still in the caucus? What's going on?
Because he needs to. He said he resigned to the whip, but he has to submit a letter to the Speaker of the House
and to Elections Canada, I believe. I think the leader at least has to, because obviously there's going to have to be a by-election there. But
he just posted on Facebook.
We don't know. We don't know if the by-election is going to happen the same in the other. We'll get to that in a second. But today they were talking in question period that this guy was on the finance committee, and they read out some of the questions that he asked at finance committee, and it has to do with how the government investigates, like, money laundering and criminal activity. And he's asking about, like, amounts and limits and stuff. Anyway, the point being, the questions he asked there were enough to get the RCMP interested, and the RCMP opened up an investigation into this guy's activities because he has all these gambling debts. And
they've been monitoring him for months apparently.
And he's asking the finance committee about almost makes it sound like he's asking how to get away with illegal movement of money. So anyway, so the NDP and the Conservatives are asking about that today, but an important question they were asking was, when did Justin Trudeau know about this? Like, when did he know about...
And even the way that it was released was so weird because, like, he posted on Facebook that he was resigning for personal and medical reasons.
And Justin Trudeau has said,
and then Justin Trudeau just, like, ratted him out.
Yeah, and then he said, like, oh, I want him to get the healing he needs for the gambling addiction. But then today he said, oh, well, there are still a lot of questions left to be asked.
I saw a quote from one of his friends saying he's not a gambling addict. The quote was really weird. It said he's a vegetarian, he doesn't drink alcohol, and he doesn't gamble.
So
from
odd,
a friend of his.
But then you have an actual criminal, well, potentially, I guess, if it's RCMP, an investigation into that. It is bizarre. The final angle about all of this is our boy Jagmeet Singh, leader of the NDP.
My personal favorite angle, the by-election angle. I love elections, as you know, Andrew.
Yeah, I know you do.
I'm obsessed with elections.
I hate them since I ran in one.
And there are many upcoming by-elections right now. Yeah. There are actually 7 upcoming by-elections. I think I had them written down somewhere. But I
think in February there's only like 2 though.
Yes. So it's 3. December 3rd, actually, in a couple of days, there'll be 2 in Leeds, Grenville, and Rideau Lakes, I think, are the 2.
Okay.
And then there's 3 more announced for February.
Okay.
Which are the Outremont in Quebec, near Montreal.
Tom Mulcair's old riding.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And then it's one outside of Toronto. I can't remember off the top of my head. And there's one in Burnaby. And now there's also 2 more because in Nanaimo, BC, the provincial MLA decided to run for mayor of Nanaimo. So now the MP is deciding to run as the MLA.
Oh, you're kidding. Okay.
So she's waiting to resign until she's able to call a by-election. So we don't know if that one will happen in February as well yet or not. And
but what's crazy is that Jagmeet Singh committed and has started campaigning basically in Burnaby South in BC, even though he's not from there.
And he's been struggling.
And it's rough because, you know, there used to be, for those who don't know, there used to be kind of a tradition back in the day that if a leader of a party was running in a by-election to get a seat in the House, right? Jagmeet Singh is the leader of the NDP, but he doesn't have a seat in the House. If they're running, the other parties would not run a candidate against that person, just so that they have kind of an easy ride to get in. But this is such a close race that both the Conservatives and the Liberals are saying, no, we're running candidates against Jagmeet Singh.
The thing is, the by-elections are so important right now. Yeah. The Conservatives have been putting a lot into all the by-elections, like they did in Quebec.
In Quebec with
Chicoutimi or whatever.
Chicoutimi-Lafleur, yeah.
They put a lot into that to try and push this kind of momentum kind of narrative, to demonstrate momentum. And they're super important for the People's Party because as soon as they run a candidate in a by-election, they're able to offer tax receipts on donations, which is huge for fundraising. And they're super important. At least this one's super important for the NDP because it's their leader getting into the House. And there's been rumors about if he's unsuccessful about getting into the House, they might dump him.
They might dump him as leader.
So I think that offers even deeper implications into especially that race because it's like, wait, how does the power of the NDP affect the other parties? Like the Liberals want a weak NDP because then they capitalize the whole left-wing vote, right?
Yeah.
The CPC want a strong NDP.
Hello and welcome to True
They want a strong NDP because then it erodes into the Liberal support, splits the vote, and allows them to come out on top in a lot of these races, like was happening not so long ago, right? As the NDP was surging under Jack Layton. That's when the CPC held government for a long time. Whereas the PPC, it's not as clear. What do they want? If they're a Conservative party, maybe they want the NDP to split the left-wing vote, just like they're kind of splitting the right-wing vote. Mm-hmm. But maybe they want a weak NDP because there has been a lot of NDP support shifting towards the PPC as a more kind of anti-establishment party. They do have a lot of crossover voters despite being kind of on different sides of the political spectrum. So it's not. So there's so many implications considering the power of the NDP might fundamentally shift after this election, because if they decide if Jagmeet Singh wins, then he maybe gets a bit more attention, but I think he hasn't demonstrated any sort of level of intellectual political IQ. He's definitely an intellectual, but definitely there's a low level of political IQ. He doesn't know how to market himself. He doesn't know how to offer his opinions in a way that gets attention. So if he's able to squeak through, which it's looking like it'll be difficult, because in the last election the NDP candidate only won by about 500 votes, and right now the Liberal candidate is polling above him. If he's not able to win, then maybe the NDP would really benefit from cutting him loose and getting some more media attention through a kind of leadership race. Not that their last one got that much media attention.
Well, I think that when Jagmeet Singh ran for, and I just posted, for those of you who are watching, I just posted in the comments our Who's Who video on Jagmeet Singh, if you're wondering who he is as leader of the NDP. We did a video on that. The thing was, when he was elected leader of his party, he looked like the young, progressive counter to Justin Trudeau.
Even more identity politics. He's not a white male. He's only a brown male, and he has a turban to boot.
He has a lot of the credentials that young progressives are looking for. Environmental bona fides, if you will.
Speaks multiple languages, career.
The thing is,
lived in different parts of the country. Like he does have a pretty good...
to get himself into Parliament quickly and to be able to showcase that contrast to Trudeau. Now, hear me out. Hear me out. The thing is that he didn't have an easy opening in terms of a by-election to run in. When he was a provincial politician in Ontario, he represented the area in Brampton
East.
Now that this same member of Parliament, Raj Grewal, has resigned, that would be the ideal place for Jagmeet to run. But because these last few weeks he's started laying the groundwork out in BC and Burnaby South to run.
And saying things like, I'm all in on Burnaby, I'm not just a political tourist.
He's boxed himself in. Here. If he says he goes to Brampton, he probably has the better chance of winning, but he looks like he's flip-flopping. He doesn't look like he's committed to the people in British Columbia. And the NDP might actually do worse in British Columbia as a result. But if he stays running in British Columbia, as you rightly said, the Liberals could beat him and he would lose the leadership of the NDP. So he's kind of stuck either way. You know?
I really think the Liberals are screwing with him. Like,
they've
for so long
off
they said they weren't going to have a
by-election. They've held off the by-election until February.
They've also done that, it seems, to allow the PPC to run, because the Liberals benefit from a somewhat strong PPC. They don't want them getting enough momentum
to pull away from the
but they want enough to pull away from the conservative vote, right? So it's this weird chess match to delay so the PPC are eligible to run, but then they seem to be screwing with Jagmeet Singh, and I don't understand why, because Jagmeet Singh has led a weak party, and they benefit from that. But all of a sudden, they're doing multiple moves to kind of destabilize, and I know they don't have absolute control over the way. But the way that it was, the Raj situation was so weirdly announced.
But it's not even done yet. Like, this is the thing. We don't even know. This is probably why Jagmeet has said so far that he's going to stick to Burnaby South. We don't know even if the Brampton by-election for Raj Grewal will be held in February with the other ones. They could be holding out until the summer. Yeah. And I mean,
no. So if it doesn't happen by February, they expect that they won't call any more by-elections.
They'll just hold it into the general.
So there's one in Montreal that's been vacated by a Liberal seat, and there's one that the other one's in Nanaimo.
And the thing is, if
those might be held just in the general.
Does not get a seat in Parliament before the next general election, it will be devastating for the NDP.
We have to imagine they'll run a leadership campaign. It would be how would he rebound from that?
What do you mean? If the party
they'd have to run like an internal a party leadership campaign. They'd have to run a leadership election.
No, but I mean if he doesn't get a seat in the sense that he doesn't run in Burnaby South and then they decide not to run the Brampton. You know what I mean? Like if he gets stuck in a situation where there's where he can run.
Oh man, if he did that, they could easily do that. Like they don't have to declare a candidate for Brampton East. They could, if Brampton East is not happening in February.
That's what I mean.
I wouldn't be surprised if I'm right and the Liberals are being savvy political.
The NDP is a huge threat to the Liberals.
But like
that's the political calculus that's going on here.
It would seem like they would offer him, they would try to pressure him into the ultimatum and try to make the Brampton one happen and try and push this Raj situation behind them as fast as possible and force them to make this decision. So I really wouldn't be surprised if they tried to turn it around quickly and do it in February, both of them in February. But in the case that it doesn't, which is like seems like the more reasonable solution. Not my like crazy conspiracy. The Liberals are launching a crazy war room campaign already. It does seem like that he would use it as a fallback, but it seems like they have to drop him. Like if he has been so irrelevant, has done nothing for the NDP support, and a leadership campaign would. Like it did on Ontario, it would give them a lot of...
Is it possible to pull up Jagmeet Singh's... I'm sorry, I've been telling a lot of people about this. Because for some people who don't realize, like... I don't think we're being too harsh on Jagmeet when we talk about his weak leadership. Like...
Well, the polls... Like, if the polls are any indication, like, they've only dropped since he gained leadership. And
I would recommend folks to go and follow. I started following this after Rick Mercer was on CBC and mentioned this. Rick Mercer, who leans pretty left, he was saying Jagmeet Singh's Instagram story is one of the most ridiculous things a politician could do. It's so feeling unofficial. Is there a way we can pull up his story?
Give me a minute.
Because it's like I saw him on Remembrance Day and he's on his story and he's like, yo, what's up? I'm here with some veterans. Like, say hi, everyone. Just some unbelievably unserious politics going on. And again, he doesn't even have a seat in Parliament. He's not there questioning the government. He's not there advocating for things.
My friends.
Oh yeah. Okay. Are we? Oh,
there's only one video on his Instagram feed.
Screen share. Let's take a look at it. It's just.
Oops.
It's just this. We're into an endless loop. It's the time.
My friends, I'm here in beautiful Ottawa.
Being shown now.
Psych the Life is a movement. How you doing?
Okay, that's the first I've seen of that.
Yeah, it's just a lot of that kind of like, hello everybody, look at me, like just a little bit amateurish. You know what I mean? Normally with people
trying to reach out to millennials
like,
in
there
a kind
are
of
people,
pandering, cringy fashion.
But I see a lot of young politicians who do social media really well, and you
Young
can do it
politicians.
by handing their phone to a staffer and then actually doing something serious. It
The
literally looks
selfies.
like he's got no one who works for him, and he just walks down the street randomly and is like, look at me, I'm going into a coffee shop now, whoa, that's so cool.
It does take the
It's like,
self-absorbed.
this is the guy who wants to be prime minister. He can't run in a seat, he can't advocate for people of any riding, and he spends most of his time on Instagram. I don't have much time for him.
It's not like the NDP had a particularly impressive slate of candidates in their last leadership election, but you got to figure like the Charlie Angus and the Guy Caron would be doing a bit of a better job.
Well, Nathan
And
Cullen
speaking
didn't
towards
run. The party should have just like forced Nathan Cullen to run. That guy, if you get a chance, just go onto YouTube. The Nathan Cullen question period. This guy is a sharpshooter. He's funny. He's not that old. He's he's got the kind of Tom Mulcair as leader of the NDP was known for questioning the government.
Yeah.
And Nathan Cullen does that really well. Even today in question period, he had a great showing.
Yeah, so maybe they could pressure him to run if Jack Meat is not successful. So
If Jack Meat's not successful, though, the party's done in 2019. Like, they won't have time to, like,
I do think
get a new leader in place.
The Ontario election, man. Like, I really think that would generate way more media than they have since Jagmeet Singh won.
You think?
Yeah, they haven't
What
got
do you
any
guys
media. Like, literally, what has he done in the last few months? Like, it was literally, oh, he won. Look, yeah, brown candidate with a first federal candidate with a turban and stuff like this. And then it was he did that one thing there was someone that started yelling racial epithets at him, and he talked her down.
We support
nicely.
you. Yeah, we love you.
Yeah, and he did all that
The thing
cutesy
is-
liberal shit. But but then like
the polling has gone steadily
he's
down.
The
For
only
NDP.
other thing I could,
Literally, the polling just keeps going. In fact, I think that the
he got married, he got engaged, he got married, and then he's running in Burnaby. That's like all he's been since he became leader.
But I think even the Eric Grenier poll that just came out for CBC says the NDP is at an all-time low. They're below. They're definitely below 20%. I think they're at like 18%.
Okay.
Something like that. Yeah.
I guess it's weird because the NDP became a party.
But that's
out
the
of another
that's
party,
the
so it
aggregate
could start.
polling, so it could be there could be some outliers.
They're
but
definitely just have steadily declined since he became leader. So,
it's terrible.
well,
What do you guys
depends
think?
on
Give us
how
a
you
quick
feel about
comment.
NDP.
What do you think of the NDP? What do you think their chances are? Do you think Jagmeet Singh's going to run in Brampton? Will he run in British Columbia?
That's the question.
Right now, the future of the NDP, I think, really depends on whether Jagmeet Singh runs in Brampton or in British Columbia, and when that election happens.
I think he should just take it to the face and just go and run in Brampton.
That's what honestly what I would do. You'd look like a flip flopper now, but come 2019, people would forget. People don't even remember where politicians' ridings are.
Yeah.
They don't remember that Andrew Scheer represents Regina, Saskatchewan, even though he's from Ontario. They don't remember that Justin Trudeau grew up in Ottawa, but he represents Papineau, Quebec. You know, it's like
I bet. Well, everyone would say Trudeau's from Quebec, but I doubt I doubt most people who know who Andrew Scheer is realize that he grew up in Ontario.
He grew up in Ontario.
I think that's probably
Even Stephen Harper grew up or has his roots in Ontario,
Yeah.
and then represent Calgary.
A lot of them moved
heritage,
out
I think.
west.
So there is some mobility there.
I didn't get to talk about Kevin O'Leary.
Kevin O'Leary, we'll have to save that for
For
next
another
time.
day.
Kevin O'Leary and
I hope
Andrew
they come to
Scheer.
Waterloo.
The new bromance. I know you're a little bitter because Kevin O'Leary's left Maxime Bernier for Andrew Scheer.
I've never been a big fan of.
We'll talk
O'Leary.
about it next time. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching, and from all of us here at True North News, including Cameron behind the camera, stay informed, friends.